on his 100th day back in office on Tuesday. A new CNN poll out Sunday shows his approval rating dropping to just 41%. Now, that is the lowest for any newly elected president at the 100-day mark in at least 7 decades. And it's not just his overall approval numbers that are on the decline. Approval of the president's handling of the economy now sits at 39%, a career low for Mr. Trump. Ron Brownstein is CNN's senior political analyst. He joins me now live from Los Angeles. Good to see you.
Hi, Rosemary.
So Donald Trump's approval rating at the 100-day mark is the worst since modern-day polling began, dropping to 41%. That's according to the latest CNN poll. And the majority of Americans say Trump has made the U.S. economy worse with his tariffs. So, Ron, how politically damaging is this for Trump, and what could it mean potentially for the 2026 midterms?
Yeah, look, President Trump is not the first president who took a pretty modest victory and inflated it in his head into a mandate for doing pretty much everything he ever wanted to do, but he has certainly taken that tendency to the max. I mean, he was a plurality winner. He did not win the popular vote. He was only the third person ever to run 3 times and never win a majority of the popular vote. And he has taken that as license to fundamentally retrench the federal government, slashing programs, reorient America's role in the world, and use federal power in unprecedented ways to target his enemies. And if you look up and down the CNN poll that came out this weekend, the New York Times Siena poll, the Washington Post poll, CBS, even Fox, they all send the same message. The majority of Americans are saying this is not what we signed up for. We hired you to do 2 jobs, get control of the border, and above all, get control of inflation. And I think the answer to your question is if he stays on the trajectory that he's on, and if his approval rating stays as low as it is now, no guarantee of that, but if it does, it will be a very difficult election in 2026 for Republicans, because the president's approval rating has become the single most important factor in shaping how the midterms sort out.
And of course, Donald Trump took power in January after promising to bring down prices, but his tariff policies have done the exact opposite, with many Americans watching their life savings dwindle and now many fearing the possibility of a recession. So how does Trump back off his tariff turmoil without losing face? Or could he perhaps choose to double down despite his historically low approval ratings?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that he was in trouble on the economy even before he announced the tariffs. If you look back, I wrote a piece in early March noting that his economic approval rating at that point, before the tariffs, was already weaker than at any point in his first term in most polls. And in fact, rarely, Rosemary, if ever, did the share of Americans who say they disapproved of his management of the economy exceed 50% at any point in his first term, even in the depths of the pandemic. Now, CNN poll today, the Washington Post ABC poll, over 60% disapprove of his handling of the economy. Initially, I think that was mostly because people thought he was slighting the problem of inflation and focusing more on other matters that were somewhat peripheral to them, like taking over Greenland or the Panama Canal or Gaza. But post tariffs, I think he has moved into a second level of difficulty, which is that people don't think so much that he's slighting the problem as that he is compounding the problem. And there's an overwhelming consensus in polls that Americans believe his tariffs are going to make the costs of their day-to-day necessities go up. I'm not sure how he gets out of this. I mean, even his fallback positions on the tariffs are in increase, and tariffs are inherently tougher on the middle and working class than they are on the rich. So he has dug a pretty serious hole here. Maybe the economy stabilizes without the tariffs taking a big bite. But you may have seen Gary Cohn, who was his first-term White House economic advisor, saying today on one of the Sunday shows that we haven't even really seen the impact yet. We're going to see it in the second half of May. His economic disapproval rating has crossed 60% before that happens. What's it going to look like after that happens?
Yeah, interesting. And Ron, as you touched on, in his first 100 days, Trump's initiatives have caused massive disruptions to individuals, institutions, and financial markets, with all his policies receiving low support from Americans. And
Mhm.
polls show there's a perception Trump's administration is trying to avoid complying with federal court orders, according to a Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll. His
Yeah.
efforts to deport migrants to El Salvador with no due process, of course, concerned many. How far might he go with this? And will the judiciary stand its ground?
It's really interesting. I mean, even as you point out, many of the specific things he has done have drawn very negative reaction in polls, pardoning the January 6th rioters, attempting to close the education department, refusing to take steps to bring back Mr. Abrego Garcia. He still gets good marks for his handling of the border, and there is still support for some of his policies, making it tougher for transgender kids to participate in school sports. But beyond that, he is facing a lot of resistance on many of the specific policies. What that translates into is another question. I mean, there's no indication that Republicans in Congress are showing any willingness to try to impose any constraints on him. But you do have to wonder. There's an old saying, the Supreme Court follows the election returns. And I do think that it is possible that all institutions outside of the Republican Party, whether we're talking about law firms, universities, the Democratic Party, or the courts, they feel more comfortable standing up to Trump in some of the ways that he is kind of barreling through our constitutional system now that he looks vulnerable than they might have if he was, kind of a colossus bestriding the political system. So we'll see what it means, but there's no question that the track he's on is one that should be worrying to Republicans about their situation in 2026. So far, that hasn't really changed their behavior, though.